This is the Educational Triage Podcast. Welcome. We invite you to come along with us on an exploration of interviews, issues, and other exciting and relevant topics in education, especially alternative education. They say alternative education is a laboratory for mainstream education. Why? Well, join us every week and listen in as Philip Summers
Aloha.
and I, Tony Hunt, jump in feet first to discuss issues that may affect our classes, students, communities, as well as our teaching. Please subscribe if you enjoy and find relevance in what you experience here. And if you haven't left a quick review, please do. We appreciate your candor and insights so we can improve as we move forward. Now, let's see what's on board today. Hey everybody, welcome to Educational Triage. This is Tony.
And this is Philip.
And we are here this week because we are going to follow up from last week where we talked about what is critical race theory. And this week we are going to talk about what critical race theory is not.
It's what it's not. Yeah.
So, well, Philip, because you know so much about this, because you studied it, and I still feel like a little bit of a babe in the woods, but what I'm understanding is that critical race theory is actually very simple in many ways.
Yeah.
I mean, just on the offset, I mean, we're not able to delve way deep into the meat, but why, before we get into what it isn't, what is this? Why are people doing all of this weird manipulation with it and getting people all ginned up? Does it have something to do with the fear factor? Is that what it's about?
Or, well, it's a boogeyman.
Yeah.
It becomes a boogeyman. You know, it's if you need to get your movement centralized, then you find an enemy. That's one of the things you do. First, you find a centralizing cause, but then you find like something that is opposing you. That may be your centralizing cause, but it's always good to have an other or an enemy. And if you carefully pick enemies, CRT kind of fits into the mold of that could be an enemy. If you interpreted it very strangely. Yeah. And very dishonestly, honestly.
But why now? I mean, it seems to me that it's an odd conflict to have at a time when we have all these other issues that are coming up with equity. Yeah. We already have racial conflicts that are there. So why poke the bear in a sense on race?
Well, critical race theory doesn't actually poke any bears. Let's review sociology lecture 101.
Oh wait, no, critical race theory doesn't poke the bears. I'm saying, why do these people?
Oh, why do the people?
Why do the people use it as a poker? When
Sociology 101, I can answer that question saying, okay. Sociology 101. Yeah. If you look at the way people interact in a society, sociology has three major ways of focusing on its trade per se. Sociology is to crowds and societies what psychology is, say, to the individual. It's a way of studying how they do their thing and how, when they do it. And sociology has three major focuses: the social interaction, and then the functional, and then the conflict that us humans have in society. So the social interaction would be, what we do day to day, anything from how do two football crowds intermingle, versus, how do you get one neighborhood to interact with another? And then the other one would be interaction in itself, functional theory. There's functional interactional theory. And interaction looks at how people do their things in society. They break into clubs, the benevolent protectorate of the cliques. And, yeah, I mean, we all do that. And why do we do that? And do we do it based on age or what? How do we do that? And then the last one, of course, is conflict. how we do our conflict as a society, where are the conflicts, that sort of thing. And that is based on Marx's work in conflict theory, because Marx focused on conflict theory. He was the originator of focusing on why do people in societies conflict with each other. And then he wrote political theory. But if you talk about Marx, that's really scary. And all conflict theory does is say in sociology is, how are people conflicting? How are they interacting when they're in conflict? What do they do? Mm-hmm. Not in war per se, that's overboard, but conflict itself. And we have a lot of it now. And CRT says that based on that conflict theory, we have to understand that we have a certain conflict about race in our nation. A news bulletin. Of course we have problems with race in this nation. And I was inclined to go, why is that? And so I went to college and tried, talk to people and whatever, and spent a lifetime trying to figure it out. And we do, in fact, I can confirm it. There is a problem with race in this nation. And conflict theory fits CRT, it fits conflict theory. And, that's basically, if you want to study it, that's how it comes up. And then there's tenets of it that just says it does exist and that it serves a purpose.
So racism exists.
It's a social construct. Yeah.
Serves the purpose.
Race exists as a construct. Yeah. And that it serves a purpose. And therefore, we keep it.
And that purpose, purpose, if I remember correctly, is that it keeps somebody down lower.
Well, it can be any kind of purpose.
It's like, because we talked about the caste system.
You're right.
Or what is the purpose of racism then?
Well, I would say it serves a lot of purposes, not the least of which is to try to keep the stratification of classes.
Okay. The classes, the caste system.
Yeah, there's the wealthy that would convince everyone that that they deserve their wealth and that below them, there's always someone below you. And then, down in the South, the good old boy system, they convince the white folks that as low as the white folks could go, they're never going to go as low as the black man, period. Right. And then that just installed itself into the psyche of society in the South. Mm-hmm. And the lost cause myth is a sociological wonderland. That's just, when you think about what that does and how it does it, it's a crazy thing to study. But yeah, it entrenched itself and it kept a certain caste of people always poor, infinitely and forevermore poor.
Let me ask a question. Yeah. From a sociological point of view then.
Yeah.
Does being given that status then, does that embed itself into the culture? For example, if the poor whites in the South feel as though they're better than the black people, is that ingrained then somehow on the DNA or just in the culture of the black people?
It's always ingrained into the culture, whether it's forced.
So it's harder for them to fight out of it.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the first thing about critical race theory is race is a construct. Now, if you turn that around, what I like to say is race doesn't exist per se. It doesn't. We're human beings. We don't differentiate as for color. We share certain traits, and those traits that would be, as a human would be, difficult to deal with would be mental illness, mm-hmm. that, and things like certain disabilities that would hold you back from functioning normally. But we're still all humans, right? And so if you look at race, that's a construct we've completely adopted, embedded, and put in the forefront of our brains that race is a thing. And we can learn not to see it per se. Culture, no. You want to see and hear everybody for who they are and hear their story. But culture is race is and base your decisions on race is a construct. Yeah.
Okay, because culture is pretty much based on everything is based upon the environment and the need to survive, and then building on that to make life a little better as you go through. with given different inputs that may come through, correct?
Yeah. It, culture is so embedded. It's so, you're right. It's economic, but it's also,
Survival.
it's just, it's what makes us humans. I mean, I really revel in the American culture, especially the music. I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
the music that we have created in the last 100 years as a culture, absolutely mind shattering to me. It's just unbelievably creative. And that was the influence of African meets American meets, the European, and it just became
Mm-hmm.
American. And that's culture to me. And you can't really put a color on that.
Right.
If you had to, I'd say it's more African than anything else, but thank goodness, it's an American art form and it's our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
that's what I think.
jazz was actually
Oh, yeah.
very much taken in over in Europe, especially in France.
Yeah, they really enjoyed jazz. In fact, they gave a lot of haven to the jazz artists in the
Mm-hmm.
30s
Yeah.
that were trying to escape racism in America. They're just going, heck, I can go to Europe and be treated like Josephine Baker, like a queen, like a
Yeah.
goddess. She was a celeb
Mm-hmm.
galore in Paris. And in America, she was just, yeah, that woman.
Mm-hmm.
It's, yeah.
Maybe it has something to do with, and I know we're not going to solve the problem of race, and I
Yeah.
want to get moving on there, but maybe America is because we are such a melting pot of so much, because we had discrimination against the Irish and the Italians
Oh,
and
yeah, everyone's
whatever
taking
was
their
the next
turn.
group that was coming over. And, and then during the war, it was the Japanese or any of the Asians, and it was
Uh-huh.
also the Germans. So there's this mob
It's
mentality that we have had as Americans for for 2 centuries.
yeah. We have to have the other.
Mm-hmm.
We always have to have the enemy. It was during World War II. I mean, there was a lot of virtue on the side of America. We'd been attacked. We were the sleeping giant. We were the one that roused. We came to the aid, and quite frankly, that generation sort of saved the world, and so we didn't rest on that as much as get the Japanese, get the Germans, with the epithets that go along with it. We became a very racist nation.
Well, the epithets that went
Yeah.
along with it, a lot of that had to do with it's easier to kill somebody that you can think of as less than.
Oh,
And so
that
by
is
using
absolutely.
those names, that's where that came from. And
And
I'll have to
wartime,
say,
yeah,
and once again, I'll say that was a survival skill.
you're absolutely right. But I would say that it was. I think we sort of focused on getting the enemy, within the same proportions as the virtue that we had. It was a very kind of virtuous sort of thing for the United States of America. I mean, they were an excellent conqueror. They didn't execute everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and it was. We could talk about that later, but we do need an enemy. And CRT, speaking of which, it falls into that line really well if you want to create a boogeyman of like what to hate in schools, especially if they're teaching
Right,
kids this.
right. And we're
Say,
going to
hey,
get
wait a
into
minute.
that. And we're going to get into that
Yeah.
because we're going to talk about an article. But
Yes.
before we do, I think that the misinformation, the
Yeah.
true disinformation um, on CRT highlights that how quickly a lie can spread across the world before the truth is finally uttered.
You're
And
so
so the
right.
damage has already been done in so many ways.
Oh,
And so it's very hard to, I think, triage, as it were, what can be done in
you're
order
right.
for people to understand it, because you have people who are, they want to believe what they hear, and this goes on everybody. It's easier when somebody tells you and you want to believe them because they are possibly from, maybe it's a sign of tribalism, they're from your tribe. And so
Yeah.
you create an echo chamber. And I think most of us do this. We have an echo chamber where we hear things from people that we want to believe. And so they give us the information that
You're right.
we want to hear, and we don't question it
The tribe.
because
I was just thinking, what does the tribe know about CRT? How many tribes out there were actually familiar intimately with CRT, except for the universities and the academics? I mean, I studied like, whoa, this is really, I mean, it's deep essays. These are really,
right,
yeah.
right. So I think that let's explore these things, and then we're going to go into
Mm-hmm.
how it what happened in some circumstances in education. One of them that hit kind of close to home for me, but
Mm-hmm.
we can go into that. So
Yeah.
let's say that, okay, so the first misconception is that it is a divisive anti-white ideology that seeks to promote reverse racism or white guilt.
that's not an accurate statement, but yeah,
Well, this is the misconception.
yes, I'm saying it is what it is. No, it's
Yeah,
not. Yeah, it is not what
it's
that is.
it's not divisive. It is more of what I would call a descriptor.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
kind of explains it explains why things are. That's its goal. Is that not correct? I mean, it's a theory.
correct,
This happened,
correct.
it's
Yeah,
cause and effect.
I think I think maybe it's best to explain. When I taught African American history, I taught at the beginning of the year. I made a disclaimer, and it was very short, but I said, "There's some of this stuff is going to make you uncomfortable, and
Mm-hmm.
based upon your race." I go, you white kids are going to feel like, whoa, my descendants did this. You browner kids are going to go, oh, my descendants suffered from this. It's like, hey, wait a second, let's slow down. We're looking at this so we can learn from this, and we're trying to understand ourselves. And then as we went through the class, I would remind them, yeah, that's those people back there were a lot like us, but remember, in that situation, it's not like today. And so I kind of disassociated them a lot of times from that because it is so emotionally charged.
And it also, I mean, it can also lead to some charging of confirmation bias.
Oh, you don't know what to do with that information if you really talk about it. Like, just, yeah, example after example of horrible violence. And when you're trying to like get that in a high school classroom, I didn't pour it on, but it's hard to talk about somebody being lynched, not in detail, but that the occurrences, and not having some of the kids identify with that. They actually
Mm-hmm.
killed this person illegally and enjoyed doing it, kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, and you have to understand. So, and I teach them that so that they don't fall prey to that sort of thinking, and they recognize it when they see it, because
Okay.
that's where history lies. So you have to disassociate it, and that was always
So,
important. Yeah,
okay. So we know now that it's not anti-white. It simply talks about
yeah,
how race is a construct.
correct. It's a construct, and it had certain consequences in certain places, especially history. When I taught African American history, that's where it really
And
focused on it. So.
and according to my sources, it's also a challenge to systemic racism
Hmm,
and its intersection with forms of oppression such as sexism, homophobia, and ableism.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're investigating, you're academically trying to objectively investigate the phenomenon and
Mm-hmm.
how it occurs and where it occurs. And I'm always trying to figure out, why is it I do what I do, even if I do something dumb. So why did I do that? Yeah.
So the next misconception is that it promotes the idea that all white people are inherently racist or privileged.
Okay. Um,
But, well,
it's
there's a power structure.
there
Is that
is
correct?
there is, but it's not just white people.
Right. So Robin DiAngelo,
Mm-hmm.
where does she
Yeah.
fall into this?
Well, we're not getting anywhere if we stay in our corners. And if white people don't understand anything other than they're a problem and that they have to correct that problem, they're not going to do it, because that doesn't motivate any people. So when you say this group needs to, or this group is benefiting from the privilege of it, and therefore they're not guilty of it, that's just not fair, because that doesn't help the person understand the situation. It doesn't disassociate them at all, does it? It's not objective. It's you.
Can you
white
give an
people.
example?
Well, yeah, you white people. That book should be, all these books should be titled You White People, and then the title of the book. What that does is that puts a laser beam focus on you white people. And that's not going to solve anything. That's like trying to solve the problem by removing parts. This machine's not going to operate. You know, you have to take it dynamically. You have to appeal to everybody. Everyone in the society is suffering from or benefiting from that racist structure we've built. It just so happens that more people of color suffer than they benefit. But I don't benefit, generally speaking, as a white male as much as the generalized white male would be visioned as. I'm right in there in the low middle class doing my thing, you know. I'm not the white people. You know, it's not my problem that I can fix and then society is fixed. It's like this big machine. And it does put that, if it puts that onus on people, then they just naturally reject it because they're not getting any help. You know, as part of the society, they need to understand everyone's involved, you know.
Right. So there's oppression as well as privilege on all sides. Everybody experiences it.
Yeah.
It's just that, well, if we look for the privilege, we'll find it. That's the confirmation bias.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like as soon as I see a Toyota in front of me on the road, I know that we're going to be going slowly.
Oh, you think it's the Toyotas that do that, huh? Well, those people drive.
And the Honda, and some Hondas.
Those Honda drivers. I thought it was those Subaru drivers that were.
Oh, the Subaru drivers. We live in the Pacific Northwest. Subaru drivers they're getting a little bit better, but they seem to think that they have a magic wand so that if they turn on the turn signal to move over a lane, that it'll be clear for them. They don't have to look.
Just to be clear, as a disclaimer, we are not generalizing and or prejudicing in any way a large group of people based upon our few incidents that we've occurred. You know, it's terrible but true. It's like, if you think about it that way, and then those Subaru drivers are black. It's like, now you just qualified. Now it's racist, but it is. It's like, oh my God.
Well, no, it's not racist. We're simply there's a kind of person that buys these vehicles.
Well, I was just thinking about that. We said somebody, then there's people who drive them are black, and it's like, wait a minute, what? Yeah. Which the truth is, no. I've seen very, very few blacks. We are just getting deeper and deeper. Sorry, Subaru, no sponsorship for us.
Okay,
all right, it's good.
Now, does CRT promote the idea of racial essentialism, or the notion that race is fixed and unchangeable as a portion of an individual's identity?
Not if it's constructed. So the whole premise about critical race theory says we constructed race as the way to sort things, and then that serves a purpose. But yeah, so that's the answer is no. I mean, because we constructed it.
Okay. So what you're saying is that just putting people into a box to
Hmm.
identify them
Hmm.
because of skin color, belief systems, culture, what have you,
Yeah.
that could be seen as the constructed racism or the
Well,
constructed race.
yeah. I mean, if it's thing about it is we've sort of created the category of race, and now critical race theory is examining the category of race, and its first premise is that race has been constructed. It's a it's an imaginary thing. It really is.
So,
I mean, you could break people right down to their hometowns if you really
right.
wanted to. Yeah, instead of like people from Africa or people from Asia or people from America.
Well, I worked with some people who were very cut and dry, very everything is very black and white, not racially, but that's just the term. And
Yeah,
very few shades of gray. They weren't able to conceive of any shades of gray. And I think that as a culture, we're getting to that point where there are no shades of gray. They talk about
mm,
nuance,
I think
but
you're right.
these are the people who are baiting other people as far as um,
Yeah,
saying something and saying, oh no, you missed the nuance of what I was saying. But I don't know whether or not in education, because Google gives us the answer so quickly, ChatGPT and the other AI bots will give us the answers very quickly. We don't
yeah,
really have to think about it. And there was a really interesting article in the conversation about everybody has to be right.
yeah. You know what
Nobody,
is that?
nobody will
It's
say,
true.
I'm learning this. And so, and there is no comfort for people who tell you, I'm
Yeah,
just learning this. Can you help me? No, you have to be right 100% of the time. You should have Googled it. You should have done this. And so we keep talking about giving
yeah.
people grace, but we just don't. And
That's. Yeah.
so
I,
I'm
I
just
was thinking about that. You're absolutely right because people will they'll argue with an expert when they're not even a novice. I've seen that,
right.
and it's like,
And
wait a minute. You're just there. You're not getting a solution. You just want to argue. That's very clear because it was just that's all they did. There really was no striving for any kind of compromise because they just wanted to argue with the person, but the person was so qualified and they were so underqualified. They just kept on talking, and it was just fascinating to watch. So, wait a minute, you're arguing with a doctor about how to do surgery, and you're a you know I don't know, you work in a daycare center. It's like a big difference in professional knowledge. It's
I was
crazy.
asked to I was asked to I was asked a question and about something, and I was caught off guard by the question.
uh,
And I was in a room with a group of students, and the teacher glibly threw this out. But this one student kept turning around and giving me these, I'm going to have to say that they were ridiculous answers.
yeah,
And so here I am trying to think about what it is, what are the questions or what are the statements that I'm going to say on something. And then they just come back with these really stupid, and I will say stupid because
yeah.
the whole idea was to throw me off balance until finally I just said, you know what? I don't know. You guys can figure it out because nobody else wanted to participate in the conversation because it wasn't a safe conversation.
It wasn't a safe conversation. That's a
And
good phrase.
And I think that we need to find ways to make conversations safe. I
Right.
mean, when you are challenged by somebody to talk about something, especially something along the lines of what is race, what are the rights that should be afforded to all humans, it should be something where there should be an unwritten agreement that we are going to listen. And if we disagree with somebody, we can say,
Yeah.
I disagree with you, and then point out the part that you either don't understand or that you disagree with, because you cannot argue unless you understand where the other person is coming from.
Exactly. Yeah,
For
it's
example, for example, I taught I would teach biology, and one of the first components of biology that I would teach
yeah.
was, well, Darwinism, of course, except I would ask my students, and it's really
Mhm.
interesting because I create a safe environment as I can. And I say, who in here believes in creationism? And it's perfectly okay. You can believe in creationism. You can believe in intellectual design. You can believe in Darwinism. And we talk about the theory of evolution. We talk about, I try to give them this information. And there's a short video on the creationist theory because there is a creationist museum, believe it or not.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And it's fascinating stuff. And so I tell my students who want to learn more about Darwinism that they are going to take either intelligent design, or creationism. And the kids who are doing those two are going to have to argue for evolution. And they're going to have to learn the facts of it. And then they are going to have to present
Yeah.
how it works, what the theories are, because I don't want somebody coming out of my classroom who says, I was forced to learn this, but I cannot believe in what I believe in. That's fine for you to believe in what you believe, as long as you understand where the other people are coming from.
Hmm.
That's called intelligent query.
That's true, and there's a little bit of compassion mixed in there. Yeah,
Right.
it actually involves you in the subject and the subjects of the. Yeah,
Because yeah,
yeah,
because you need to understand all the heuristics of what it is that you're doing, right? So
yeah,
if you're given a
exactly.
polemic, if you're given a polemic like how was everything created, what kind of timeline do you have,
Well,
then
that's or that too.
they go in, and then they can talk to their parents, they can talk to other people. Except I have people come in and tell me that they are coming in to teach my kids about the Bible, and I tell them that I'm
Yeah.
coming to your church and I'm going to preach for you. And
Yeah,
they said that's not going to happen, and I said exactly. So
they said
if
with
you
like school prayer, you want you to do school prayer. Go, you want me to do school prayer? Look at me to do school prayer. You do not want that. Yeah, really, you don't. It's not the place. It's just place and setting. And
right.
I was thinking when you're talking, one of the things is I was thinking about the veil. And then I started thinking maybe it's thicker than a veil. Maybe it's like a burlap sack, this burlap sack of BS kind of that goes over people's heads, and they start to believe stuff that's clearly not worth believing, and they
Right.
defend it, and it's clearly not defensible, and
Well, they don't
then they'll
understand it.
they just well, if I don't know about the flat earth guys, but it's I thought we all understood because there's
Well,
pictures.
you know,
There's people who can test to it. I mean, there's enough evidence to say to believe that the earth is flat is just downright silly, and you're just being kind of confrontational because
but if you
evidence
think about the
proves you
ancient
wrong.
Greeks, if you
Yeah,
think about the ancient Greeks,
who
they
thought the
believed
world
that
was
that
flat.
Greece and everything was right here, right in the
Yeah.
center,
Yes, they
and
did.
Mount Olympus was right dead center of all that, and surrounding them was the river ocean.
Yeah.
And on
And
the other side of that were the Elysian fields. Now, if somebody were to come to me and they could give me a really good argument about that, then I would say,
you'd
great,
say, I'll go for that. But the
show
truth
me,
was,
tell
we
me more.
found out
But
that
it doesn't.
that wasn't, unless
Right.
you were way
That
back then. It was just
right.
wishful thinking, kind of like, yeah,
And
kind of like,
as I get older, there's more to the entire idea of the center of the earth and the river ocean and the Elysian fields. There was far
yeah,
more. But you also have to remember about their level of technology. their level of understanding, their level and the basic level of education that they used to have back then, because our students, every student that we have is extremely privileged for the most part in how much education that they are actually given and that they have in front of them.
Yeah, you are right. However, I still contend that you're delusional if you believe the earth is flat, because it's not. It's just, we know it's not.
Okay,
but
we can
agree. So
to
do that would be like, hey, now you have to kind of like stop wasting people's time by trying to convince them of something that we all know is absurd because you want to believe it. There's a certain point where evidence has to be here in your face. You go, yeah, I see that. That's evidence. I don't know if the Greeks would have seen it. I don't know if they can conceived it, but we sure can. And then,
they were.
That's what I say with the burlap sack of BS that sometimes we throw over ourselves.
But if you think about it, back then the Greeks were very much connected with the ocean, and they still are.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why.
And so they were. If you think about the great armies that they had, I mean, the Spartans, the Athenians, the Peloponnesian Wars, everything. But the Greeks actually went over and they conquered Rome. They conquered Italy. They conquered Sicily. And then all these people came back, and then it was this weird thing where they went back and forth. And so, and then they went down to Africa. So back then, you still had the miscegenation that was going on back then. That was there were no laws against it whatsoever, really. So
taxed. I don't know a lot about Greek history, but you were probably taxed by your Greekness, your citizenship, and your status.
Probably your status. But then if you also think about the fact with the Moorish influence of invading Europe, they did, there was a lot of miscegenation that happened at that point as well.
We're mutts, all of us, yeah.
Yeah. So,
we really basically are. I mean, there's a bunch of white folks walking around harboring African DNA and vice versa. I mean, it's obvious. So,
right. Yeah. Right.
Race is sort of mixed up.
Okay, next point. Some people suggested that it's being taught in the schools.
Yeah, no.
So people are worried that their children are being indoctrinated. So, and I think that we can now bring up this article from the New York Magazine, which was How to Manufacture a Moral Panic.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yep, Christopher Rufo helped incite an uproar over racism education with dramatic and dodgy reporting. There it is, dodgy. Yeah, a lot of the times people are trying to pursue a story, but they already have the outcome in mind. And that is not a decent way to inquire.
Well, here's my question, because I have the article down in the show notes. If you look at the article and you read it, it's intriguing because I don't see anything wrong really with what's going on in the one teacher. The first teacher, his name is Toketa Kuwatan. And he was teaching about the Mayan culture or the Aztec culture.
Yeah.
And so this journalist, Rufo, decided that he drummed up this entire mythos about what was going on in there, and how he had designed a curriculum where they were talking about human sacrifice and cannibalism and doing all these wonderful things, and the kids were supposed to be shouting to these gods, which to many people could be tantamount to devil worship in many ways.
I
And
suppose.
so getting the religious zealots
Yeah.
all worked up about this because they don't know any better, but they're also not the kind that are going to investigate and delve
Well,
any deeper.
isn't that ironically and strangely accepted? If somebody says something about something and they didn't investigate it, contempt without prior investigation, I don't trust that source.
Right. But then
Yeah.
he publishes in a journal. It's on the conservative news
Again, looking
channels,
for the outcome, working backward from the outcome that they want.
right? Right.
Yeah.
He even went in there. He even was arguing with Joyanne Reed on MSNBC
Oh, Joy
about
Reid.
all of this. So
Boy,
it's
that's
very,
too
very
deep.
strange because he made such an impact in fear mongering, is basically what he did, and
Well,
giving out so much disinformation.
why was it fear mongering? Because when you read it, you get scared. Like, wait a minute here. So yeah, that's fear mongering. It's not. It's not
Right.
objective. It's not.
It's
If you
not
were to teach about
honest.
the Comanche society, the fact of the matter is, you'd have to edit a lot or tell the whole truth because they delighted in murdering and torturing people they captured. It
Right.
was a thing they all, even the children enjoyed it, and it was like that makes me mad. It's like, hey, that's wrong, but that happened like 150 some years ago, so that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to talk about that if you want to talk about Cherokee society, or I'm sorry, Comanche society. And so I guess if you're going to talk about this, yeah, but to like, I wouldn't want to like actually, how did they scalp people, or what specifically, how did they torture people? It's like, no, you study that in college if you want. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
no. It's a high school. And so if you're talking about public school, then okay, maybe you don't teach it, or you don't teach it in depth. And when you talk about it in depth, you go to college. There's books. You can always buy a book. It's a perfectly one book called The People of the Summer Moon. It's an excellent book. It tells you all about
The
Comanche
more you
society.
read, the more you learn.
Yeah, I mean, are we going to say, well, that book makes some people uncomfortable? Actually, makes me uncomfortable too. So I don't want anybody in myself not to read it. To read it, it's like that's insane.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not indoctrinating. It's just that you have to kind of deal with it.
Right.
I get mad,
Right. And you just have
thinking
to
about the
learn
brutal trade of
because,
the peasants.
yeah. I will say that my district where I was working, they're pretty progressive, and I came up with that because there are no standards. I had my students learn how to part of their one semester credit was for them to watch these videos about human migration in the early days and moving
Mm.
across and starting and how the world began to be populated. And then they had to study. I'm trying to remember because it's been a while since I read it because it was a few years ago when I wrote it. They have to identify and they have to learn about one of their own culture or one of their cultures if they're mixed, and then they can identify that and they can learn their ancestry and learn more about that culture and what components of that culture they still honor today,
Yeah.
and whether or not things are still happening over there. And even with the age of exploration, in a sense, I don't care where you are in the world, you still had groups of people from all seven continents
Yeah.
they were out there navigating and exploring.
Yeah. They were conquering, and they were enslaving in many
Mm-hmm.
cultures. So they were all these cultures were doing all these things that humans tend to do in
Right.
their
But that
worst
was,
states.
but they put a quash on that because they wanted to keep with the mandated social studies curriculum.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that. It,
Right. So that went down the tubes for the credit recovery and for the high school completion kids. So, but
yeah.
back onto this, we have to think about, we have all of this. He was very effective in ginning the crowd up and getting people to listen to him.
Yeah.
And I believe that possibly people were duped by him because they thought he was an actual journalist who had actually done his due diligence, but they didn't do their due diligence with
Mm-hmm.
him. And
Mm-hmm.
so he brings up things about diversity training. So we have to be careful with that. He got,
Well, he was working
his
with James
ideas
O'Keefe at one point. He and James O'Keefe from
Yeah.
Project
And James
Veritas.
O'Keefe, I think, got rid of him, didn't he?
I don't know the specifics, but I know they worked together. They worked alongside each other, and it's like James O'Keefe was a very dishonest quote journalist.
So anyway, so then they come to the Tiger Twelton School District where I used to work.
Yeah.
And now he says that the director of equity and inclusion is dictating that people follow the tenets of Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed.
Yeah. Now, if you thought critical race theory was complicated and deep, let's go with Paulo Freire.
So here's what I'm going to say about Paulo Freire's book, and that is, boy, what is it? He says, okay, that there needs, here's what they're, here's the tenets of Paulo Freire.
Pedagogy of the oppressed is
the teacher and the students need to be collaborating. We do that in alternative ed. And the reason why I'm going to go through these tenets is because not everybody reads Freire, and it's not a book that's easily digested. You need to actually go through it, and you need to be reading it with other people so that you can dialogue your way through.
There's a lot of background to his stuff that if you don't know, it's like, what? So you have to ask somebody, oh, I know about that. Yeah.
This is just it boiled down, okay? Then there's conscientization, and it's about raising critical consciousness, because students should be able to examine the world around them critically and take action to transform it. If that means political action, if that means going in and volunteering, there are far more other ways of taking action than politicizing everything. Problem posing education. An approach to education that's based on problem posing than just memorizing facts.
You mean outcome based or project
Exactly.
based?
Outcome based.
That's what it is. Yeah.
So students are encouraged to ask questions, challenge, and engage in critical thinking.
And fail.
Contextualization.
Try again. Yeah.
Lived experiences of the students so that the learning is relevant to them and to their problems, their issues, and where they are, where they're going. Then there's the idea of praxis, where education should be linked to action, where you should be looking at real world problems and students should be trying to solve them. So it's not just these are the problems, it's how do we solve these problems? So there's a lot of critical action.
And
then you have the humanization, because we need to fulfill the full potential of the individual. I want my kids to be feeling as though they are not just worthy, but they are also capable of doing a number of things. And if they realize that they fall short on some issues, well, they can figure out a way to get there, because every kid is an individual. And in alternative ed, we want our kids to be individualized. So these are basically the points that we have from Freire.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Well, I don't know about we want kids to be individualized. I think we
yes,
honor
we do.
Their individualization. I think we also want kids to learn how to work in teams.
They have to learn how to work in teams
and things like that. And
if you want to clone your kids, do you want your kids to be clones?
Well, they would be another being like them, but they wouldn't be the same person. No, I mean, that's kind of a strange.
Because they're an individual. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
Every child, every student brings their own skills and talents to a
Exactly. Every
team.
human brings their own
Right.
story
But
behind
they
them. Yeah,
are
absolutely.
different
You're right.
individuals.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone does that. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. I just don't want to treat. I don't have to teach them to be individuals per se. I just really respect it and encourage it, and that's true. You're right. You're right. That would be true. Everyone's responsible for their own
Okay.
actions.
So I think that, did we cover it all?
Yeah.
Oh,
Um.
wait, let me get back to the Tiger Twelton deal.
Oh, you never. Yeah, I was gonna say. Wait. Because you got. I was
Okay,
just the thing about
I'm
that.
gonna
You
have
got
to
down
come
to
back
that.
on this. Okay,
He
now
thinks all that's Marxist. He thinks Paulo Freire's
he
Marxist.
thinks it's all Marxist,
He
and
called him Marxist. It's
Freire
like, well,
is a
where is?
Marxist.
Yeah,
He is a
yeah.
Freire is a Marxist, but his ideas are the ideas that we teach and that we honor.
Because he
They're the same
studies
ideas.
conflict. No,
In
not
many
because he
ways, they are the
studies
same
conflict.
ideas that the Jesuits teach and that other people teach in their curriculum and have for millennia.
Right.
So this is nothing new whatsoever. So, and I know that Zinnia Un looks out for kids. In fact, yesterday I was told about something wonderful that she had done for my former program. So kudos to you, Zinnia
Nice.
Un. And then we have all these other ideas and things that he talks about. But what he does is he takes a little pea and turns it into a bowl of mashed potatoes.
Mm.
So a lot of what he has said and a lot of the misinformation that people are getting is based on pretty much a concoction of lies that has
Yep.
nothing there, so that the boogeyman is there.
A
And
burlap
so it's
sack of
not just
BS.
the race, it's not just the racism that's
Yeah.
being the boogeyman.
Yeah.
It's the whole concept of a theory. So it's almost the same, we're almost at the same place that Darwinism was before we hit the Scopes trial. Is that making sense?
It does make sense. It's absolutely freaking nuts. Because it's like you come to a certain place in your logic and go, yep, that's all the logic I have today. No more. Every other decision I make from now on is going to be completely based on whatever I pull out of my keister. It's like, yeah, I
And the
don't
problem
understand
is that
adults acting like children and getting away with it, and it makes me angry.
in a
That's
sense,
the kids' table.
yes.
Yeah, there's the kids' table and there's the adult table, and there are an awful lot of morons at the adult table. I think they need to go to the kids' table and discuss things on the less complicated level.
And it happens on both sides of the aisle, though.
Oh, just people like that are just people like that. They should be at the kids' table.
And a lot of times I hear people talking about things and it's like, where are you getting these ideas? Because they are so misaligned with what you're talking with whatever it is.
Some of them are just kind of made up. It's like, wait, that is totally made up. No, right. It's not. No, it is. It's got to be.
Or
because it's crazy.
And sometimes people choose their belief system, and they will. And this is really interesting. People will defend a lie as long as it is a person that they believe in. It's almost like Stockholm syndrome.
Well, it's like it serves a purpose. They'll believe the lie if it serves a purpose.
They will push forth the lie.
Yes. That's true.
Because it serves a purpose.
Promote it or withdraw it or tweak it or whatever it does to get the purpose done. And that's what critical race theory said about race. The complete fallacy is that race is a thing, and that we go out of our way to make sure it matters a lot in all kinds of complicated ways.
Here's a question.
Yeah. Is
racism profitable?
Extremely profitable. Extremely profitable. It builds nations.
So think about that. But is it profitable in the United States?
Absolutely.
Is being divisive in the United States profitable?
Oh, we all know that. Very, based
For
upon what
some
I've
people,
seen.
it is.
Lately, somebody got called on it, but
Mm-hmm.
they got rid of their problem, I guess, and now it's all going to be better. I remember when it was announced. I have to say that with a straight face. We're observing the highest in journalistic standards. Oh my goodness.
Okay.
It's very profitable, and that was the whole point of that. They were
Yeah.
willing to go completely off whatever definition of journalism there was to not upset their audience with the truth. And that's news is the truth. It's like, don't be in the truth business if you don't have any. And there you go.
And be honest about it.
Yeah, I mean, people pushing their status when they have none, or they've created it themselves and then pandered it to an audience that just grants them the numbers.
Right.
We don't have to listen to that. It's sort of absurd. We have a lot of problems in our nation, but yeah, we shouldn't do it that way.
But sometimes it's like saying, don't look at an accident.
Yeah, everyone wants to look at the accidents unless you do. I was a paramedic for a bunch of years. I don't like accidents. Like, oh, maybe someone asked me to help. I don't want to do that either. Did that. Yeah. I'd do it, but it's like accidents are kind of like, if you did it, like if you're a rescue person, after a while it's your job. It's like, oh, it's not thrilling. It hurts your heart. Kind of like this stuff that's happening on TV where they say this outrageous stuff that isn't true. It kind of hurts my heart. It's like, that's just not true. Don't tell people that. It's not helping anything. Like, okay, this Christopher Rufo article.
So let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
In conclusion, it's not divisive or anti-white ideology. It's a it's something that describes what's going on and explains where racism came from, how it's used.
Yeah.
It does not promote the idea that all white people are inherently racist or privileged. Privilege and oppression happen on both sides, on all sides.
Yeah, everywhere.
All around the world.
All around the world. That's what I meant. Yeah, everywhere, not just
here. Racial essentialism, and that race is fixed and unchangeable as part of an individual's identity, is not correct.
Absolutely.
So, and there's not the indoctrination that's going on in schools. If a teacher is doing something about some kind of political indoctrination, that has nothing to do with CRT. That has to do with somebody who is not doing their job.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment. If your kids are learning CRT in high school, they were extremely smart kids. They're studying graduate school stuff. But concurrently, you can't teach, CRT at the high school level. It's too complicated, and you can't go anywhere in the elementary school level. And if you're teaching kids to feel bad about their race, that has nothing to do with.
That's on you.
That's bad teaching. Yeah,
because every child should be cherished and welcomed, wanted, needed, valued.
Yeah. We're all part of the same team, man. It's like, I want everyone working with each other. I want to stop arguing, resolve. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what I teach. So.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up, and I want to thank everybody for showing up. Make sure that you do hit that like button, that you hit that subscribe button, that you go for notifications, and that you also leave us a review, leave us a comment for those of you on YouTube. And next week, we will have the indomitable and wonderful Dr. Maria Christina. And she will take us through some ways to alleviate stress and anxiety, things that are simple, things that you can incorporate in your daily routine. So until then, Philip, thank you so much. I will see you soon. And same to everybody else. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.